is leaving the city of no swings and coming here now. It's not good. It's not good.
Here's one for you, Tim. Just a bit of feedback. We haven't had time for this. Stephen Frank's ideological underwear is showing. Blame the individuals, ignore the structural bias against the poor, judgment punish, lock them up, get the churches and civil society to help the marginalised.
Showing your undies, Stephen.
There's one for you. But also another one, in fairness, it's wonderful to hear him, someone not scared to speak the truth and unbowed by RNZ. So there you have it. A lot of others we haven't got time for. But interesting one here. A province in Vanuatu is banning Western junk food, saying it's not good for the local population and there's plenty of fresh food to be sourced locally. The Pacific nation's most isolated province, Torba, is concerned about the increase of the amount of junk food from overseas making its way onto the local diet. To make sure that there's no temptations in place, it's ordered the province's tourism bungalows to start only serving guests locally grown organic food as well. They want a complete ban on foreign food in place within 2 years. Lavina, what do you think? No M&Ms in the minibar. What do you think about this bold move?
It's an interesting move. It's obviously just a province of Vanuatu where they've come out and said within the next 2 years we don't want to have this westernised food because our country is getting bigger in size, and they mean the people, not the land itself. And there's too much sugar and too much fat in the food, and we're actually not making any money out of it. So it's a little bit dictatorship for me. I don't smoke and I wear a seatbelt. I don't always like being told don't smoke in this place and always being told to wear a seatbelt. I don't know if I'd like to be told you can't eat takeaway food. But I do know when friends of mine try to lose weight, they get all the junk food and they remove it from their cupboards and they take it out of their fridges and they throw it away, and it does help them live a healthier lifestyle. So if it's not there and we don't expose them to
that's what
That's
what the Pacific communities are doing, aren't they? It's about taking back control for them, isn't it, Stephen? You know, it's happening in other island nations. Second-grade food like mutton flaps, locals there are waking up to the fact that health needs to come first. Good on them.
I quite like the idea that it could be a tourism bonus for families with kids who raid the
who don't go on swings.
Exactly. Yeah. I used to imagine if you didn't tell your kids, but you took them all there and they'd said, for the next 2 weeks, you're stuck on fruit and vegetables.
Have a coconut. No more M&Ms. That's it. No more.
So it might be a selling point for the province?
It might be, yes. Yeah. There's a market for everything. I hope it's a big enough one.
Mm. I mean, that is an issue, though, isn't it? You go to, for some, you go to the islands and some of the food, Western prepared, substandard, all you want to go there, you want to have, Lavina, higher quality local produce.
You do want to have it, but our children aren't brought up that way. And if you take young kids to an island, what they want is nuggets, chips and hamburgers. And if it's not available, it would be great if they could have local produce. And in fact, every night I fight with my children over the broccoli beans. And tonight it will be Brussels sprouts because I'm in that kind of mood. I'm in that mood, believe me. I was stuck in traffic for an hour and a half getting here, so I'm in a Brussels sprout mood. I know when I go on an island holiday, I do like to enjoy the local produce, and I would hope that my kids would like that as well.
It is great to have you both on, Stephen Frank, Lavina Dodd. We didn't get to what you've both been talking about, but another time. I'm Wallison for the panel. Thank you all for joining us.
Kia ora, I'm Sharon Brett Kelly, and on behalf of our excellent team, Heidi Mai, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Tonight, the government changes the rules for getting approval for medical cannabis. It promises easier access, but will it really make a difference to people who need it? We'll talk to the Minister, Peter Dunn. Housing New Zealand reveals how many social houses it's actually building in Auckland over the next 3 years. Opposition parties say it's far from the thousands that are needed and were promised. Pike River protesters put up effigies along the mine access road, forcing Solid Energy workers to turn back, and a delay in handing over the mine. And NASA's flying laboratory touches down in Christchurch.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten aho. Advocates for medicinal cannabis are praising a rule change that makes the drug easier to get, but say it doesn't go far enough. The Associate Health Minister, Peter Dunn, has announced he's delegated approval for the use of the drug to the Health Ministry. Rose Renton's son Alex, who suffered severe seizures, was the first person in New Zealand to be granted an exemption to use cannabis after Mr Dunn approved it as a one-off treatment. Ms Renton says the change upholds the relationship between the patient and the doctor without government interference, but more must be done.
We've still got a price problem. $1,200 for 1 month prescription is unaffordable, and we should have an access to cannabis that's affordable, and maybe that's the politicians' next step.
Rose Renton. The coordinator for medical cannabis awareness, Shane Lebrun, says taking Mr Dunn's signature out of the equation won't speed things up much, but the other move, compiling a list of approved products, will make a difference. He says it's down to the ministry becoming confident in the products people are applying for. The Health Ministry says since 2008, 163 applications for the medicinal cannabis product Sativex have been approved. It says 6 applications were declined, and at the end of January there were 2 Sativex applications in progress. The ministry says since 2015, 7 non-pharmaceutical grade cannabis-based product applications have been approved. A surge in rental prices in Wellington has been put down to a big decline in the number of houses available to rent in the past year. The capital's median rents have increased nearly 7% to $480 per week, just $40 below Auckland's. Jacob McSweeney reports.
TradeMe's head of property, Nigel Jeffries, says the surge has been caused by a 70% decline in the number of rental properties available during the past year. He says people are holding on to rentals longer while they try to save for a house deposit, meaning those properties are not being made available for new tenants. Mr Jeffries says the council and universities have also done well to attract more people into the region to work and study, boosting demand for properties. The price increase means tenants will pay $1,500 more for a median rental in the capital over a year, up nearly 25% on 5 years ago. Ko Jacob McSweeney, Tēnei.
Housing New Zealand has confirmed its social housing build program will add only an extra 700 houses in Auckland in the next 3 years. Its Chief Executive, Andrew Mackenzie, has told Parliament's Social Services Committee the corporation's build program in the city is ambitious. Mr Mackenzie says overall the State Housing Agency will build nearly 5,000 new homes in Auckland over the next 3 years, most of them replacing existing social houses.
There would be a net growth in the volume of housing of 722. We're at a phase where we need to create capacity to be able to utilise the land better. So we need to create capacity to move our tenants into the new homes, free up land.
Andrew Mackenzie says the long-term aim is to build an extra 30,000 houses in Auckland in the next 30 to 50 years. New leaks from copper pipes have still been discovered at Wellington Hospital, and it's stretching maintenance staff. That's the message the Capital and Coast District Health Board gave MPs at Parliament today. RNZ News reported last year extensive pinhole leaks in hot and cold water pipes had developed throughout the relatively new hospital. The DHB's chair, Andrew Blair, told members of the Health Select Committee the problem was first discovered in the first half of last year, and new leaks have been appearing at a rate of up to 5 a week. He said the board has begun legal action against the manufacturer, the construction company and the engineers involved. The government has asked for a full cost-benefit analysis on income-based lending limits before agreeing to let the Reserve Bank add it to its toolkit. The Reserve Bank has pushed hard for extra powers to consider debt-to-income ratios, maintaining the rise in the number of heavily indebted households as a threat to the soundness of the financial system. The Finance Minister, Stephen Joyce, is cautious about allowing it, saying he's particularly interested in what effects it could have on first home buyers. Mr Joyce also wants feedback from the public, which is expected to take place between March and June. It's 5:04. To sport, and the former All-White Sam Malcolmson says it's been a day of reflection for him following the death of friend and former teammate Steve Sumner. The 61-year-old died today after a battle with cancer. Sumner and Malcolmson first played against each other in 1974 and were teammates when Sumner led New Zealand to the 1982 World Cup. But Malcolmson says they became true friends after the February 2011 Christchurch earthquake.
He phoned me up and he actually phoned me and says he's not hearing from his daughter Tori, so he's going to look for her. And she was apparently in a building that could be coming down. Obviously picked her up and everything was okay, but that was the start of our becoming very close to each other.
Former All-White Sam Malcolmson. New Zealand's world #1 golfer Lydia Ko says she'll be taking charge of her game this season rather than her parents. When Ko and her former coach David Ledbetter split late last year, Ledbetter said the 19-year-old's parents have too much influence. Ko agrees her parents have a strong influence, but that will change under new South Africa coach Gary Gilchrist.
The process for me to grow as a person and as a player in that way, if things don't go right, I'm still able to learn from that, and I think that's the best way, because there's always going to be great people around you, but I think I can't always rely on them.
Lydia Ko. The Silver Ferns have trounced Wales 92-27 in the opening test of a 2-match series in Cardiff. Game 2 is tomorrow. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Robert Hoare on the lookout for moths, New Zealand's forgotten pollinators, and the impact streetlights might be having on their sex lives. And Silver Tamber reports in from Estonia, where the Turks are building a new mosque, and the locals are quite relaxed about it, really. And there's debate about the role stones play in Estonian national identity. Or are they boulders? Find out on Nights of me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waitomo, also Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Rain or showers with possible localised downpours, easing to isolated showers early tomorrow, but becoming fine from Waikato and Bay of Plenty southwards. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain possibly heavy, easing about Hawke's Bay overnight, and Gisborne later tomorrow. Taihape to Wellington, cloud clearing overnight and becoming fine. Taranaki, Taumaranui and Taupo, also Wairarapa, Marlborough and Canterbury. Mostly cloudy with isolated showers today. Fine tomorrow, but the odd shower remaining in Wairarapa. Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland, mostly fine. Isolated showers in Buller, spreading to Westland tomorrow. Becoming cloudy in Fiordland tomorrow with patchy rain at night. Otago and Southland fine, apart from isolated showers about eastern Otago until this evening. And the Chatham Islands, fine spells increasing. It's 5:07, and you're listening to Checkpoint.
The government is promising medical cannabis will be quicker and easier to access under policy changes announced today, but admits there are only a small number of quality products available. The changes mean medicinal cannabis products will no longer require ministerial sign-off, and responsibility for approvals has been given to the Ministry of Health. The Associate Health Minister, Peter Dunn, says a relatively small list of appropriate cannabis-based products will be compiled to provide clarity on the issue. I spoke to Mr Dunn and asked what would happen now.
I'm going to be contacting the medical profession and the Pharmaceutical Society with advice from the Ministry of Health on a list of products that are not necessarily of pharmaceutical grade but which meet good manufacturing practice that they might want to consider prescribing for patients who seek a medicinal cannabis-based solution. So when you put the two together, more information, a streamlined process, more progress.
But what practical difference does this make to people who want medical cannabis? Well,
they first will need to talk to their GP, as they always have done, get a prescription from the GP and the specialist, and then have that considered and signed off by the Ministry of Health. At the moment, they then have to come to me on top of that for approval. I'm taking that step out of the process, so it will make it quicker. It will make it better. Is it going to mean more cases are prescribed? I don't know, because that really depends on what the decision of a medical practitioner is as to whether that's the best treatment available.
And what is your message to medical practitioners? Because there's a lot of scepticism in the profession about medical cannabis.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point. My message to them is pretty blunt. It's to be open, to consider the facts and the evidence, and to make the best decision in the interests of your patients. I think that some just don't want to know, and some are prejudiced. I think that the days of not wanting to know and prejudice are over. This is about really saying, let's look at the evidence and the facts and make the best decision you can in the interests of your patients. And I'm not telling doctors that they must prescribe cannabis-based medical products. That would be totally irresponsible of me to do that. I'm simply saying that they need to consider the options and make the best decisions they feel that are in their patients' interests.
And does this include botanical products?
Well, the list that we will provide will be of products that meet a good manufacturing standard. I can't tell you what that list is at this stage because it's still being compiled, but most of the products will be well known to us, and I suspect it will be relatively small in number.
Ross Bell from the Drug Foundation says this isn't groundbreaking. It's a small step, it's not significant. He said the biggest issue is the lack of products and price. Price is a barrier.
I think he's right. And this was never intended to be a groundbreaking decision. This was one step in a series of steps. Last December, for instance, I made an equally important announcement which was overlooked, which was that patients seeking Sativex for multiple sclerosis conditions no longer need the approval of the Ministry of Health. They can get that directly on the prescription of their medical advisor. So this was one more step along the way. But Ross's point is absolutely correct. The issue worldwide is the availability of products of a quality standard. It's pretty low. There are very few. And the issue also is price. On the price front, we treat medicines of this nature the same way as we treat every other medicine. So the funding decision is one for Pharmac to make based on an application from the manufacturer or supplier. It's not an issue that the government gets involved in for obvious reasons.
Mr Dunn, how much have you been influenced by campaigns like the Renton case, like Helen Kelly on this?
To be perfectly honest, not at all. I set out right from the beginning to have a clear process in mind that we would work through. Once we had a sufficient body of expertise and knowledge about these products and their impact on particular patients, then we could start to move in the direction that we have done. What I'm not trying to be disrespectful towards the individual cases or campaigns. I've deliberately kept my distance from them because I've been solely concerned that our decisions are based on the evidence and the facts, and I've not tried to get involved in if you like, some of the quite traumatic personal circumstances around individuals. I've really focused on what's in the best interests overall, and I think that the steady, progressive way in which we've approached this is justified and right, and it certainly stacks up well against international practice.
And just getting back to the issue of sourcing products, should New Zealand get into manufacturing these products?
Well, the difficulty is that there are a few manufacturers who control the licensing of their products very tightly. There's nothing to stop clinical trials taking place in New Zealand for people wishing to trial new products. The reality is that provision has been available for some years. No one has shown any interest in undertaking such trials in this country, and the reason is quite simple. Their perception of the market size is that it's very small, and this is, in a way, typical of all medicines and all medical-related products. There's nothing different in that respect. So it's a factor of our size, which means we've had to look overseas. We need to keep a close eye on what's going on in other places like Australia, who are just starting the clinical trial process. They're a little bit behind us, like monitoring what's happening in jurisdictions in Europe and elsewhere. So we keep our eyes open to those possibilities, but the bottom line is until more products become available, there's always going to be a challenge in that respect.
Is this a step towards decriminalisation of recreational cannabis?
No, the government's got no interest, nor has the leader of the Labour Party, in decriminalising recreational cannabis. And to try and bring the two together is wrong. This is a completely separate issue. There is some evidence available that cannabis-based medicines can be effective in particular situations. My focus is simply on progressing that.
Good news for you in election year. I mean, a big step. This raises your profile.
I don't think this is really about electoral timing. This was always a time frame I had in mind from the time that the issue first came on the public agenda about 2 years ago. I felt that by about now we would be at a stage where a sufficient body of knowledge and expertise had built up within the Ministry of Health so that it would be appropriate to make this delegation. Bear in mind that the number of cases that came before me as Minister was about 7 only, and every single one of those was approved. So there's not despite the noise, there's not actually, when it comes to the crunch, a huge demand historically for these medicines in New Zealand, and that brings us back to the supply issue. The perception of the suppliers is that there's not a big market here, so it's always going to be a challenge for us in getting good quality available product.
Sure, and just lastly, Mr Dunn, are you planning to stand in Ohariu Belmont?
Look, that's an entirely separate question. I've said all along it's my intention to do so, but that's got nothing to do with today's events.
Peter Dunn's announcement has received a rather lukewarm reception from health professionals and advocacy groups. Critics say while the policy change may streamline applications for specialists, the issue of affordability for patients still hasn't been addressed. Laura Tupou reports.
Dr. Huhana Hickey is an academic and has multiple sclerosis. She says Peter Dunn's announcement is more of a shuffle than a step forward.
The government need to look seriously and get realistic, have a bipartisan approach and look through all the parties and find the best policy that's safe, that can be implemented, and do it quickly. Stop mucking around. It's time they moved on it. Ironically, though, it's interesting that they suddenly want to talk about this. Is it because it's election year? And will they actually do anything, or is it just going to be empty talk? I would like to see some action on the ground now, not waiting for an election.
Dr. Hickey says in order to send a message to the minister, people buying medicinal cannabis on the black market need to step up and apply for products through the ministry. But she knows many people won't be able to afford the price of the legal products.
When you look at the fact that someone can go out and get a tinny or even get an ounce for about, I've been told, I think it's about $360, $400. Well, that's a hell of a lot cheaper than paying $800, isn't it?
Dr. Hickey uses Tilray, a product from Canada that she got ministerial permission for last year, but it still costs her $800 a month. The Medical Cannabis Awareness Coordinator, Shane LeBrun, says the large cost of importing products is a real issue.
Importation of cannabis-based products is quite expensive, and that's a key part of the cost. Sativex is almost half the price back in the UK where it's made. So what we really need to do is get some manufacturing to a high standard done here in New Zealand.
Mr. LeBrun says there could be scope for medicinal cannabis to be produced locally in a few years' time. The Drug Foundation's Executive Director Ross Bell says a privately funded research project in New South Wales on the commercial production of medicinal cannabis is currently underway. He says once the results are out, New Zealand could piggyback on its findings and use that to start up local operations. But in the meantime, he says the real win today is the commitment to compile a menu of products that the Ministry of Health will do due diligence on.
At the moment, a patient and the specialist have to be the ones that pull together a whole lot of detail around, what is the product, how was it made, how can you guarantee the safety, and so on. And we've been saying for a long time that the Ministry of Health is better placed because of its relationships it's going to have with other ministries of health in countries that do have medical cannabis regimes.
For the Medical Association, this is just a streamlining of processes. Its chair, Stephen Child, says it isn't a breakthrough. He says there are many restricted medications in New Zealand that need to meet conditions before they're given out, and now some medicinal cannabis products will be added to the list.
It's just moving a product into the usual regulatory systems that we have in place to protect the public and to protect the vulnerable.
Since 2008, the Ministry of Health has approved 163 applications for Sativex, declined 6, and at the end of January had 2 applications in progress. Since 2015, it says 7 non-pharmaceutical grade cannabis-based product applications have been approved. Mō te otaka o te ahiahi, ko Laura Tupou aho.
And we'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Has the government made it easy enough? Text us on 2101 or go to our site on Facebook. Now, Solid Energy has had to ask for more time to get Pike River Mine sealed. Mark Pisey, the Chief Inspector for High Hazards at WorkSafe, says the mine's owner, Solid Energy, made the application for an extension due to circumstances beyond its control. Solid Energy says it has been prevented from putting the final seal in place within the original timeframe, which was this month. It now has until the end of June to do so. The spokesman for some of the families of the 29 Pike victims, Bernie Monk, is encouraged that their sustained protest has had an effect. He says today they gave one of their strongest pushes yet, a move which again forced Solid Energy vehicles to turn around at the access road to the mine.
Quite a few of the family members and their supporters turned up very early this morning and erected 29 sort of like mannequin type of effective guys, all dressed in overalls and some of them some of the miners, it's their working overalls, miners' hats with all their tags on, and miners' boots on, and we set them up and down the road where the guys have got to drive through every day to go up to the mine. And, you know, you say 29 and it's just a number, but when you actually see these big guys standing there on the road, 29 of them, it really hits home. It was quite emotional for a lot of the people standing there, and the silence was unbelievable. And the effect was when Solid Energy turned up in their trucks, they seen what was there, and they stopped there for probably a minute, and then they reversed and drove away.
Right, so it was a pretty effective kind of protest.
Oh, very much so, and probably one of our biggest pushes to date, and it was really amazing the effect it had on everyone, really, and everyone said how emotional they felt about it, seeing it. You know, it was a.
Why today, Bernie?
Well, I think we attempt to do something different every day. And, you know, we have the Nurses Union representative up there today supporting us. A lot of people are up there supporting us, and we just do something every day. And it's not just about being, you know, up in arms about something. We want just people to realise how important it is to do this job.
Do you think Bill English realises what's going on up there and the depth of feeling there?
Probably not. I mean, they, in fairness to them, they're relying on the company that they've put in charge to do the job. They left it all up to them. It's the 1 minute they're saying it's not a political decision, and the next minute when something hard-hitting like this comes along or goes into Parliament or whatever, they're the big voice behind it. So they have $1 each way on everything that's done up there, I think.
You've just had your meeting with the Prime Minister, Bill English, confirmed for next Wednesday. So some might see this as kind of an antagonistic move.
Well, you know, I mean, we're not going to change Solid Energy's decision. They're definitely not going to do it. So our thing will be there to impress on him that Solid Energy have got to go. Now, there's no reason to keep Solid Energy there. The seal that they've put into that mine is, according to WorkSafe, is all that needs to be done. So as far as we're concerned, let's get rid of them and let's get another entity on board of which the government can be part of, and our experts part of that as well, and let's sit down the table and discuss the reasons why our protest has been going on for so long, and let's make this job happen.
Solid Energy was scheduled to hand the mine back to the government this month. What's the latest on that?
Well, the latest is because of probably our protesting, we're into over our 12th week now of being up there 24 hours a day. So they haven't been able to do any work, and I implore all the contractors on the West Coast refuse to do any work for them. So they're at a stalemate here, and you know, they've asked for an extension from WorkSafe, which they got granted. So heavens knows when it's ever going to get done. So that's another reason for them to move out, move on, and let somebody in there to do the job that needs to be done.
Bernie Monk. And the Prime Minister, Bill English, announced yesterday he'll meet with members of the Pike families at Parliament next Wednesday. Coming up next, how many new social houses are going to be built in Auckland, really? And later, NASA's flying laboratory touches down in Christchurch. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. And don't forget, you can watch us online at rnz.co.nz/checkpoint, on Freeview Channel 50 and on Facebook. Housing New Zealand is being accused of presenting misleading figures to a parliamentary committee about the number of new houses it's building in Auckland by its own minister. It told MPs over the next 3 years its build program will add only an extra 722 houses in Auckland. And that's what the opposition says is a far cry from the thousands that are needed. But Housing New Zealand's Minister, Amy Adams, says that doesn't give the full picture and the actual number is much higher. In the last half hour, Housing New Zealand has issued a statement saying the Chief Executive mixed up the numbers at the Select Committee and referred to the national rather than the Auckland figures. Here's our political reporter, Demelza Leslie.
Housing New Zealand's Chief Executive Andrew Mackenzie fronted up to Parliament's Social Services Committee this morning to explain the corporation's build program in Auckland. He told MPs overall nearly 5,000 new homes will be built in the city over the next 3 years. But Mr Mackenzie says most of them are replacing existing social houses.
In terms of the 4,900, there would be a net growth in the volume of housing of 722. As I said, we're at a phase where we need to create capacity to be able to utilise the land better. So we need to create capacity to move our tenants into the new homes, free up land.
Labour's housing spokesperson Phil Twyford says that number is pathetic. He says there are more than 2,500 families on the social housing waiting list in Auckland, and the program will house only a quarter of them.
Well, it shows that all the big talk from Bill English about building houses has just been hot air. We've got people living in cars and garages, sleeping out in parks, and the best that the national government can do is promise an extra 240 state houses a year in Auckland.
The Prime Minister, Bill English, says Housing New Zealand's figures aren't an accurate reflection of what's actually going to be available.
Because now we'll be getting a lot of new houses in Auckland from agencies other than Housing New Zealand, for instance Tamaki Redevelopment Company. So over the next 3 years, as my advice is, there'll be around 2,000 extra social housing places in Auckland, which will go some way to meet the demand.
But the Green Party co-leader Meteri Ature says Mr English's empty promises are catching up on him.
Yeah, this Prime Minister is the architect of New Zealand's housing crisis, and they have been making promises for more houses now for quite a few years, and none are turning up. I mean, it's just, promises are no good for the families who are living in their cars and in other people's garages and who are desperate for a home.
The minister responsible for Housing New Zealand, Amy Adams, says social housing waiting lists will be cut by the building project. She says in addition to the Housing New Zealand homes, community housing providers are building another 857 social houses in Auckland over the next 3 years.
This is all about net new housing places, so this is all about increasing the total stock we have available of social housing places. So over the next 3.5 years, we're looking to increase that by 10%, but at the same time, putting significant time and resource into improving the quality of the stock that we have. So over the next 3.5 years, as I said, we want 6,500 new places which are available for social housing tenants that aren't currently there.
Housing New Zealand is Auckland's biggest residential property owner with 30,000 houses. The agency says the long-term aim is to double that portfolio by building another 30,000 social houses in Auckland over the next 30 to 50 years. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Demelza Leslie.
For the first time in American politics, the country's vice president has stepped in to confirm a cabinet nomination. The US Senate has confirmed Donald Trump's nominee for Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, but only after Mike Pence stepped in to cast a tie-breaking vote. Mrs. DeVos is a wealthy Republican donor. Her husband is the former CEO of Amway, but she is an advocate of charter schools and has no experience with public schooling. At the same time, Republicans are accusing Democrats of stalling and holding up the confirmation process for other key Trump nominees. CNN's Manu Raju has this report.
President Donald Trump gets his Secretary of Education.
The nays are 50.
But only after Mike Pence made history by becoming the first vice president ever to break a tie in the Senate for a cabinet nominee.
The vice president votes in the affirmative and the nomination is confirmed.
The new secretary, Betsy DeVos, came under fire after last month's rocky confirmation hearings.
Thank you for the call today.
Prompting liberal activists to flood Republican offices with phone calls and hold rallies on Capitol Hill, questioning her fitness for the job. after two GOP senators announced their opposition. Democrats staged an all-night session, hoping to convince one other Republican to block the nomination.
It was the most embarrassing confirmation hearing I have ever seen. She could not answer the most basic questions about education.
But Republicans held firm and are furious at the slow pace of confirmations, since Trump has more unconfirmed nominees at this point in his presidency than the past 11 presidents combined.
The Democrats are clearly sore losers, and they refuse to listen to the American people who on Election Day said, we're sick and tired of the delays that we've been having in Washington.
This week, 3 more Trump nominees could be confirmed, including Jeff Sessions to be Attorney General, Steven Mnuchin as Treasury Secretary, and Tom Price for Health and Human Services.
We're going to have long debates on Sessions, and we're going to have debates on Price.
But now Trump's labor nominee, Andy Puzder, is facing controversy after revealing this week that he had hired a housekeeper who was an undocumented immigrant from Guatemala, saying he has since paid back taxes. Similar controversies have sunk nominees in the past, including Bill Clinton's choice for Attorney General, Zoe Baird, in 1993.
For all of my Republican colleagues who say that we should be treating Trump's nominees just like we treated Democratic nominees, well, then this nominee should withdraw, because similar conduct forced Obama nominees and Clinton nominees to withdraw their candidacies.
The revelations are giving pause to some key Republicans.
When he knew, how he found out, what he did afterwards. You take them all in context, and I'm not prepared to make a definitive statement until I've seen all the facts.
But GOP leaders are downplaying the matter.
Will this sink his nomination?
He realized the mistake, he fixed it, and I think is eminently qualified for the job. And for myself, I'm enthusiastically in his camp.
And that's senior Republican Senator Mitch McConnell ending that report from CNN's Manu Raju. Coming up, why Lydia Ko is getting a new coach, caddy and equipment, and how many new leaks are being discovered each week in Wellington Hospital's pipes. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
Advocates for medicinal cannabis are praising a rule change that makes the drug easier to get, but say it doesn't go far enough. The Associate Health Minister, Peter Dunn, has announced he's delegated approval for the use of the drug to the Health Ministry. Rose Renton says the change upholds the relationship between the patient and doctor without government interference. But Ms Renton, whose son Alex was the first person in New Zealand to be granted an exemption to use cannabis, says the medicinal product is still not affordable. Shane Lebrun of Medical Cannabis Awareness says taking Mr Dunn's signature out of the equation won't speed things up much, but the other move, compiling a list of approved products, will make a difference. Housing New Zealand has corrected figures it gave to MPs about how many social houses it's building in Auckland. The Social Housing Agency said its social housing build program will add an extra 1,400 houses in Auckland over the next 3 years, not the 722 that its chief executive told a parliamentary select committee. A surge in rental prices in Wellington is being put down to a big decline in the number of houses available to rent in the past year, as people rent for longer to try to save for house deposits. The capital's median rents have increased nearly 7% to $480 per week, just $40 below Auckland's. Solid Energy has had to ask for more time to permanently seal the Pike River mine. The company says it's been prevented from putting the final seal in place with the original time frame of this month. WorkSafe says it now has until the end of June to do so. A spokesperson for some of the victims' families who are trying to stop the sealing believes their sustained protests have caused the delay. The government has asked for a full cost-benefit analysis on income-based lending limits before agreeing to let the Reserve Bank add it to its toolkit. The Reserve Bank has pushed hard for extra powers to consider debt-to-income ratios. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Kia ora, Katrina. The Commerce Commission is taking the Australian-owned building supplies firm Bunnings to court over what it says is misleading advertising. Our business reporter Nona Peltier has been looking at the case. And Nona, what's this all about?
Well, it's about their price guarantee. So Bunnings have been running advertising for
I guess the period that they're talking about is an 18-month period, so that's from July 2014 to February 2016. I think those ads might still be running to some extent. I'm not exactly sure what the price guarantee issue is. The Commerce Commission wouldn't elaborate on those charges. There's 45 charges pending. I think they're going to be going to court next month. What's the case about? It's really that the one home renovation company has been offering a price guarantee, lowest prices guarantee. The Commerce Commission is saying that's misleading. The Bunnings have said, no, we're going to defend our position and our price guarantee in the court. So we'll find out what happens. I did try to contact Mitre 10 to find out what their view of it is. They didn't get back to me. So I guess we'll just have to see next month what happens.
We will. And changing topics, the government has asked for a full cost-benefit analysis on income-based lending limits. Explain that, please, Nona.
Okay, well, that's a difficult one because as you know, the Reserve Bank has been trying to rein in the high housing house prices rising. So that's been a big concern for the Reserve Bank. They've tried all kinds of things to try and rein that in because it's a risk to our financial stability. I mean, if it was the prices were to drop suddenly, there'd be some people who couldn't pay their bills. So the bank has brought in this one thing to cool the market, which was called the loan to value rate. You know, people have heard about that. That's the LVR, loan to value ratio. That's where banks are restricted on how much they can lend versus how much you put down on a house. Well, the debt to income is a much more, I guess, controversial piece, and the Reserve Bank has no power to implement it, but they've asked for that power. And what that is basically how much you have, how much you earn, versus how much income, how much you can use of that income to service the debt. So, you know, if you're making $100,000 family income, how much of that income are you allowed to use to service a mortgage? If it's, say, 30%, that's not going to be enough for some people to own a home. Very controversial. So what the government is saying is, let's have a look at this to see what impact that will have on first-time home buyers. One of the issues has been recently, yesterday, the governor of the central bank, Graham Wheeler, said he was going to step down. It didn't take very long for the Property Investors Association to step up and say, you know what, this is a good time to review those loan-to-value ratios because it has had an impact on people's ability to enter the market in the first place. So again, the government's a little bit reluctant to give this power to the central bank, and they're saying, let's have a cost-benefit analysis of what this is and how that's going to impact first-time home buyers. Does that explain it?
That explains it perfectly. Now, what's been happening on the markets today?
Right, the markets, well, actually, the markets have been kind of quiet today, sitting on the sidelines somewhat. There's been a lot of, as you can imagine, geopolitical activity with Donald Trump's policies, or the policies that are yet to be defined in terms of economic impacts. Europe is a bit in a flux with some impending elections there, some concerns with debt, and so our market ended down just 1 point. That's to 7,066. The Kiwi is trading at 73.1 US cents and 95.6 Australian.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nona Peltier. He wasn't New Zealand's greatest footballer, but a man you'd probably pick first for your best all-time team. That's how many are describing former All Whites captain Steve Sumner, who died this morning at the age of 61. Sumner was diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer in late 2015. Sports reporter Barry Guy looks back on the life of one of the most influential figures in New Zealand football.
The ball into what could have been a tricky situation, and what a mistake by Danny McGrain, and Steve Sumner has made it 3-1, and that is exactly what Scotland didn't need, and Sumner has brought smiles back onto the faces of the whole of New Zealand, I would imagine, with that.
There is little doubt that Sumner is best remembered for leading the national side in the qualification for and playing in New Zealand's first World Cup finals. English-born Sumner was the All Whites' most influential player at the 1982 tournament in Spain. He scored in their opening game against Scotland to become the first player from Oceania to score in a World Cup. Speaking last year, Sumner says he remembers that goal well.
If I'd have missed it, it would have been a Minties ad, wouldn't it? That's what it would have been. But I can still remember it quite vividly. I can remember Winton running down the line with the ball and playing the ball in behind their back line. I managed to get a toe at it and poking underneath him. As I sort of fell across the top of him, The ball popped out the other side, and there it was, right in front of me.
He played a record 105 games for New Zealand between 1976 and 1988, scoring 22 goals. New Zealand's goalkeeper at that tournament and later chairman of New Zealand football, Frank van Hattem, says it was better playing with Sumner than against him.
He was a winner. He was an absolute bastard to play against. You know, if you were on the opposition, he was a winner for the other side. He would do anything in his power, get in your head. He was a winner, and he brought that to his team, and he made it work. When you're with him, man, he was a great guy to follow. He was with you the whole way.
Kevin Fallon, who was assistant coach in '82, agrees that Sumner had the X factor.
You'll never forget him because he's one of these people you had to single out. Somebody had to look after Sumner at set play, at corners, in general play. You couldn't ignore the boy. And that's the biggest accolade probably I could say. He was a warrior, and certainly was always down in my notes in the diary. Sumner, ? What we're going to do with him.
Sumner was awarded the FIFA Order of Merit at a ceremony prior to the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. Last year he received the New Zealand Order of Merit for his services to football. Sumner would regularly comment on the state of the game for us and was passionate about the game. Frank van Hattem says he will go down as one of New Zealand's all-time best players.
Was he a better player than Winton? Of course he wasn't. Was he the best player that's ever played for New Zealand? Probably he'd be right up there. People would say he was a complete player. He could, he'd get forward, he'd get back, good leader. I think what's very, very clear, if they were picking an all-time New Zealand team, he's in there in the midfield and probably be captain.
And Sumner's name will go on. Last year he had a stand named after him at English Park in Christchurch. For Checkpoint, Barry Guy.
And Steve Sumner is survived by his wife Jude and 4 children. Up to 5 new leaks a week are being discovered throughout Wellington Regional Hospital's copper piping. Parliament's Health Select Committee heard today the problem is stretching hospital maintenance staff, and it could well add to a rapidly worsening deficit at the cash-strapped Capital and Coast District Health Board. Our health correspondent Karen Brown reports.
RNZ News reported last year that copper pipes used throughout the 48,000 square metre hospital in Newtown were riddled with tiny holes and causing extensive leaks. The DHB chair, Andrew Blair, told MPs today the leaky pipes still pose a major challenge for the DHB.
These leaks were first discovered to be an issue in the first half of 2016 and have been appearing at a rate of between none and 5 new leaks a week. While not directly impacting on the quality of care and services we provide, they are certainly an inconvenience and are stretching our maintenance services.
Mr Blair told MPs the DHB's already initiated legal action at the High Court.
The pipes are clearly not performing as they should have, and the problem is either with their manufacture or how they were installed, or both. For these reasons, the board has initiated legal proceedings against the manufacturer, the construction company and the engineers involved.
The DHB's been tight-lipped about the case while legal action is underway and faced no follow-up questions from MPs. But there were plenty of questions after Mr Blair told them that the debt-plagued DHB, which was in the red last year to the tune of almost $12 million, is now forecasting a deficit of $17.9 million this financial year. Andrew Blair, in the job since Christmas, said while it's not acceptable, it is less than 2% of its billion-dollar budget.
Obviously, with 5 months of the year to go, we'll be doing everything we can to reduce that. But there may well be other factors outside of our control that make it worse.
Labour's health spokesperson Annette King pointed out the DHB receives 11 cents less in every dollar under a population-based funding formula because the community it serves is relatively young and urban rather than rural. DHB chiefs agreed, but Mr Blair stressed they must do better and find a way to live within their means.
I think the important thing is that it's not having an impact on the services that we deliver. Either
no, I didn't ask that. I asked about the money.
As I said, any deficit is not satisfactory in my view, and we are doing work with management now to find out the drivers of it and come up with a strategy to reverse that.
He added the forecast $17.9 million isn't as bad as the DHB's $68 million deficit in 2008-09, which was the nation's worst ever. But a close examination of how it delivers services would be needed.
I think how we deliver our services needs to be looked at.
So what are you looking at in terms of changing service delivery?
I don't have any initiatives right now. It's something that the new board is working with the chief executive and management to review.
The DHB was also pressed about criticism over its management of autistic man Ashley Peacock, who's in a mental health unit. A mental health services clinical director, Dr. Susanna Every-Palmer, said Mr. Peacock is not in isolation but has high and complex needs.
The issue is just simply one of managing the risk. And so as we transition him somewhere else, we have to make sure that he's safe, that the public are safe, and that the staff who are working with him are safe.
The DHB said caring for Mr. Peacock costs it $750,000 a year, with the Tairāwhiti DHB contributing $183,000 a year. For Checkpoint, Karen Brown.
New Zealand golfer and world #1 Lydia Ko has introduced a raft of changes to her game ahead of the 2017 LPGA season. Ko has confirmed she has a new coach, caddy and new equipment, all before her first tournament of the year. And as Matt Chatterton reports, more changes are on the way.
Lydia Ko confirmed today she's now under the tutelage of South African swing guru Gary Gilchrist. It finalises the trio of changes she's made. Her new caddy is South African Gary Matthews, and she's switched from Callaway Golf Clubs to the new brand on the block, PXG. Gilchrist coaches world #2 Arya Jutanagan from Thailand and world #4 Shan Shan Feng of China. He was also the understudy of Ko's former coach David Ledbetter. Ko says she doesn't expect a conflict of interest to arise between her, Gilchrist and Jutanagan, despite the competitive nature of professional golf.
There's, a bunch of us that work with Gary, and I think, they all trust him and, enjoy working with him. So I don't think it's necessarily a rivalry thing, but, it almost gives me confidence that, hey, he's a great coach, and, hopefully this will be good going forward.
Following their public split, Ko's former coach Ledbetter warned the 19-year-old that her parents have too much influence on her and she must take control. Ko agrees her parents do have a big say, but only want what's best for her. However, she says she will be taking greater control in 2017.
The process for me to grow as a person and as a player in that way, if things don't go right, I'm still able to learn from that, and I think that's the best way, because there's always going to be great people around you, but I think I can't always rely on them.
Meanwhile, the International Golf Federation is considering moving the location of the 2020 Olympic golf course, as the current one is a men-only club. A vote was due to take place today among club members on whether it would allow females to join, but it's been postponed. Asked for her thoughts on the matter, Ko was diplomatic.
The world itself is changing, and I think the game itself is changing. So hopefully, they'll in the future, or within some time, there'll be no golf courses where they restrict it to just one sort of player, and it will be available for all.
Ko's first tournament of the season is at the Australian Open next week. In the meantime, she's spending some downtime here in New Zealand. For Checkpoint, Matt Chatterton.
Hawke's Bay residents are worried record low water levels in the region will get even worse when bottling companies reach peak production. Yesterday, the Regional Council said it desperately needed rain, and stringent water restrictions and bans are already in place. Some ratepayers are calling for a halt to any further water consents until more is known about the region's already stressed water assets. There are 11 consented commercial water bottling takes, of which 6 have yet to be exercised. Local designer David Trubridge, who last year staged a sprinkler protest, questions whether the community benefits at all from commercial water bottling operations. He told me giving away assets to big business has struck a nerve with locals.
What we're concerned about is drawing a line in the sand now before they do come in and take a lot more, and then it does start to become a problem. And for me, the issue is not just water, it's just the whole thing of how much do we allow big business to come in and take from our community. At what point do we say, well, actually, we're not benefiting from this enough, we'd rather retain these for ourselves, or are we benefiting enough from this to make it worthwhile giving away these assets? And I'm talking about fresh air, clean water, the oceans, all these kind of things which are generally associated with being the commons. And yet we're being encroached, those commons are being encroached on more and more by business who wants to use it for their own profit. And I think the water has really struck a nerve with people. They're thinking, well, this is our water. What's going on?
And it makes people particularly angry at the moment, given the bans that they are facing. So local people can't use their sprinklers, that kind of thing, and yet these big bottling companies can take as much water as they want.
In theory, they can. As I say, they're not yet doing it, but yes, in theory, they can. And this is the concern: is that how much would they take if all the consents which have been issued were taken up? And are there limits on it? I mean, presumably, there are sort of different stages at which rationing comes in, and domestic supply is the most important one. So they'll cut out irrigation before they'll cut out restrict people's drinking water. So there will be restrictions on bottling, but we don't know how much. And the problem is with this is that there is not enough data to make an informed argument at the moment. We're waiting on scientific research to say exactly how much water there is and how much we can take. We don't know. They've been issuing consents left, right and centre, but they don't even know how much water's there.
Have you talked to the regional council about this?
I'm in communication with one of the councillors, yes, Tom Belford, who is on the regional council.
And what's he saying? Does he support you?
He supports me, yeah, but this whole issue of information is the key of it. We can't make decisions until we know what we're basing our decisions on, and that is there's a survey called TANK. That's the names of the different rivers in the area. It's a scientific survey which they're pretty extensive, and they're doing that to work out exactly how much water we have in the aquifers and how much water is coming in to refill them as we take it out. And until we know those things, we can't really do anything. And I don't think we certainly shouldn't be giving away more bottling rights.
So what do you want right now? Do you want a halt to the bottling or the taking of water by these commercial operators until you know more about what's happening?
Absolutely, yes. And I think this is the general sentiment in Hawke's Bay, is that we don't know what's going on. In the meantime, we cannot go on giving our water away for free.
Should consents be revoked?
I think they should. I think we've given away too many already, but legally probably that's not possible.
And I mean, I think there's the argument that these commercial companies are actually providing jobs in the Hawke's Bay, which are desperately needed. What do you say to that?
Yes, and this is always the carrot that's dangled in front of us. Oh, we'll give you jobs and we'll do all this. The issue is how many jobs and what are those jobs worth? And I think that this is the case of all these things, about like for oil exploration, for fracking, for more dairying, more intensive farming. These are all supposed to generate more jobs. But at what point do we say, actually, our environment, our community is being affected too much, and those few jobs that actually come out of this, always far less than what they say, are not worth the price we're paying for what we're giving away. And I think this is my issue. We have to sort of draw this line in the sand and say, certain things about our community we want to retain. We don't want to give everything away for exploitation commercially.
Do you see this as an election issue, David?
Nationally or locally?
Locally.
Definitely locally, and it had a big impact on the last round of local regional elections. I mean, that's why the council changed its makeup in the regional council, was because people are concerned. And so the councillors who were elected in were the people who were saying, we want to look after our water better, we want to stop the Ruatanawha Dam. So it definitely already has had an effect. And I think nationally in the long term, I think this is going to have an effect too. And this relates to river quality, which is all part of the water issue. And people are getting very upset about this continual degradation of our environment.
It's David Trowbridge. Renowned author Patricia Grace has written another chapter in her fight to retain her ancestral land in Waikanae. Well, she had already won a legal battle against the government, which was threatening to take her land for a kapiti road. She's now challenging the Public Works Act itself. Te Manu Kōrehi reporter Aaron Smale has more.
Mrs Grace appeared at a Māori Affairs Select Committee hearing today in Parliament to support a petition that calls for Māori land to be exempt from the Public Works Act. The act is used by the government to compel private landowners to sell their land for public services. In some cases under the law, Māori land was taken without payment. The petition was started by Green MP Catherine Delahunty, who tabled a bill in Parliament last year calling for the change, but that bill was defeated. Mrs Grace says although she won her legal case, she feels the victory was a hollow one because the Public Works Act is still being used to take Māori land, including from neighbours in whānau.
We couldn't stop the motorway or the expressway, but we could stop NZTA from taking our land, which meant they had to go around our land. The rest of the whānau, who were block owners, just did the best they could to minimise that, and they supported where we were coming from. I felt bad for them. It was like because of me, some of their land was being taken. A lot of theirs had been taken already.
Ms Delahunty says the petition is challenging the Select Committee to investigate the effect the law has had on Māori and whether it should be changed to exclude land that is owned under the Māori Land Court system. She says the government regularly apologises in treaty settlements for breaches that occurred through the Public Works Act, but carries on using it to take Māori land.
Waitangi Tribunal has been very clear that the Public Works Act has been a major instrument of land alienation in this country, and that's another reason why we need to make sure it can't continue.
She says the argument that exempting Māori land from the Public Works Act will give Māori owners a privileged position doesn't stack up.
Māori landowners of collectively owned land are put under pressure to give up their land for the public good, when tangata whenua in this country have given enough for the public good. And as Patricia said this morning, whānau have given a great deal to allow Pākehā to have access to resources in this country, and it's time for that to stop.
Mrs Grace inherited the land from her ancestor, the 19th century Māori leader and politician Wi Parata Te Kākākura, who also fought a legal battle for Ngāti Toa land ne Porirua. That legal case led to the then Chief Justice referring to the Treaty of Waitangi as a simple nullity, which has become an infamous phrase in New Zealand history. Sir Eddie Dury, the former chairman of the Waitangi Tribunal, says some of the most well-known protests have been over land that was taken using the Public Works Act, such as Bastion Point.
The land at Okahu Bay, which contained the marae and so on, was taken under the Public Works Act. It's at Bastion Point, and that's which led to that big protest, that the land was taken there because the new Queen Elizabeth in the early 1950s was paying a visit out that way. They wanted to clean up the area.
Mrs Grace says she's been asked whether she intends to write a book about the experience.
My answer to that is that I've already written it when I wrote Pōtiki, because it was about land development, about Māori resistance. Probably won't be writing another Pōtiki.
The Select Committee has reserved a decision on the petition. For Checkpoint, ko Aaron Smaltine.
NASA's Flying Laboratory, which is conducting a worldwide survey of the Earth's atmosphere, has touched down in Christchurch for a second season. Staff on board the DC-8 aircraft are flying across the globe on a 28-day mission, gathering data in the air to better understand climate change and air pollution. Maya Burry reports.
This is the second of 4 trips in the flying lab NASA intends to make for the Atmospheric Tomography, or ATOM, mission. The lead principal investigator for the $30 million project, Steve Woofsey, says the research is groundbreaking.
Nobody has ever been able to take a flying laboratory of this complexity and navigate the entire globe and really look at the whole world at once. And I really do hope that it helps people to understand how human beings are affecting the atmosphere.
On board the plane are 22 different instruments used to study atmospheric gases and particles. NASA research pilot Wayne Ringelberg says the once commercial aircraft, built in the 60s, has been retrofitted with high-tech gear.
So we'll have a row of instruments and a row of seats for the people working that instrument, and then a row of instruments all the way back. And we've got 20, 30 instruments, and then most of the instruments will be up against a window, and we'll take the window out and put in a plate, and the plate will have probes that extend out into the atmosphere.
The probes take samples of the air in different parts of the Earth's atmosphere. Steve Woofsey says during each flight of about 10 hours duration, the plane goes up and down continually.
Like riding the elevator. Remember how when you were a kid you used to like to ride the elevator? Well, we're riding the elevator in the sky. So we have to go up and down in order to sample the full range of the atmosphere, in order to get this understanding quantitatively about how human beings are affecting the remote part of the atmosphere and the climate and air quality.
One of the research scientists gathering and analysing the data is Chelsea Thompson. She says working with such complex instruments presents some challenges.
I mean, this is sort of a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It's a very ambitious project to fly around the entire world 4 times. with this entire payload. It's ambitious also from a logistical standpoint. We have to pack a little spares box of the things that might break and hopefully fix whatever happens along the way, and hopefully nothing really bad happens.
The DC-8 is about halfway through its journey and will leave New Zealand for Chile in South America on Friday. Ms Thompson says going around the world in 28 days takes its toll.
It is an exercise in jet lag, for sure. We fly 11 hours. Then we get to some country, you have to go through customs, lug your bags, find your hotel. It's a very long day and it's very exhausting.
Once the NASA team gets back to Palmdale, California in February, it will take about 6 months to collate all of the data. They will be back on the Flying Lab for their third trip around the globe in October. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
And coming up after the 6 o'clock news, more on Donald Trump's travel ban and stomping on Twitter abuse, one troll at a time.
RNZ News at 6. Ngamihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina bat in aho. Almost 500 workers have been evacuated from the Inland Revenue Department's Hawkstone Street building in Wellington because of earthquake damage. Engineers found the damage when they did an invasive inspection. Staff were sent home this afternoon. An IRD spokesperson, Pete van Schadenberg, says a couple of the precast concrete floors are damaged and the building has been closed as a precautionary measure. The City Council's recovery manager, Mike Mendonça, says the building was one of 80 ordered to have new, more comprehensive checks in the wake of the November earthquake. He says there are no concerns for public safety. A rule change that should mean faster and easier access to medicinal cannabis has had a lukewarm reception from drug campaigners. The Associate Health Minister, Peter Dunn, has also announced there'll be a list of pharmaceutical-grade cannabis products, but not how much they'll cost. Laura Tupou reports.
Medicinal cannabis will no longer require ministerial sign-off and will instead be able to be approved by the Health Ministry. Campaigners say that might speed up access a little, but the real problem is how much the drugs cost. Rose Renton's son Alex, who suffered severe seizures, was the first person in New Zealand to be granted an exemption to use cannabis after Mr Dunn approved it as a one-off treatment. She says $1,200 a month for a prescription is far too much. The Drug Foundation says the cost would come down if medicinal cannabis was manufactured locally. Ko Laura Tupou aho.
Housing New Zealand has corrected figures it gave to MPs about how many new social houses it's building in Auckland. The Social Housing Agency says it will add an extra 1,400 homes in Auckland in the next 3 years, not the 722 figure its chief executive used. Housing New Zealand's head, Andrew Mackenzie, told Parliament's Social Services Committee the corporation will build nearly 5,000 new homes in Auckland in the next 3 years. He said one of those, more than 4,000, were replacing existing state houses and 722 were new stock. After the hearing, the figures were called misleading by the Prime Minister and the Minister responsible for the agency. In a statement this afternoon, Housing New Zealand said its chief executive had used wrong figures. Rents in Wellington have increased nearly 7% on last year, with tenants paying about $1,500 more annually. Trade Me property data shows the median rent for properties in the capital has risen to $480 per week, just $40 below Auckland. It's also nearly 25% up on 5 years ago, when median rents were just above $390 a week. TradeMe's head of property, Nigel Jeffries, says the surge has been caused by a 70% decline in the number of rental properties available during the past year.
If we look at this last January, the stock levels of rental properties available for rent on the market are 70% lower than the previous year. A lot of the stock has been taken up over the last 12 months. It hasn't been replenished as you would normally expect.
Nigel Jeffries says a lot of people are staying in rentals for consecutive years rather than moving on. Capital and Coast District Health Board says leaking copper pipes in Wellington Hospital continue to pose problems. It told MPs today up to 5 new leaks appear each week. Our health correspondent Karen Brown reports.
The DHB's chair, Andrew Blair, told the Health Select Committee the leaks were discovered in the first half of last year. He said while they're not directly affecting the quality of care and services, they're stretching maintenance services. The pipes are not performing as they should, with the problem concerning either their manufacture, installation or both. Mr Blair said the DHB's begun High Court proceedings against the manufacturer, the construction company and the engineers involved. Work is also being done on how to fix the problem and the likely costs. Ko Karen Brown Tene.
A report into the now-defunct Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority has found it struggled to demonstrate its effectiveness and value for money the longer it existed. The Auditor-General's report assessing the authority's effectiveness and efficiency was presented to Parliament today. The authority was established in March 2011 in response to the Canterbury quakes and over 5 years spent $4 billion on a wide range of programs and projects as it coordinated the recovery. The report found that while the authority did well early on in the recovery, it didn't maintain momentum, failed to engage well with the community and struggled to demonstrate its effectiveness and value for money as it took on more responsibility. The minister who oversaw the authority, Jerry Brownlee, says the report is unbalanced at times. He says it doesn't compare the authority with other recovery agencies or post-disaster experiences worldwide. Solid Energy has had to ask for more time to permanently seal the Pike River mine, and some of the families of the 29 men who died in the explosions in 2010 say that's because of their protest against the sealing. They want the mine's entry tunnel searched for bodies and evidence first. Solid Energy says it's been prevented from putting the final seal in place within the original timeframe, which was this month. WorkSafe says it now has until the end of June to do so. A spokesperson for some of the families, Bernie Monk, believes their sustained protests have been responsible. He says Solid Energy trucks couldn't get to the mine today after they were confronted with effigies of the 29 victims. It's 6:05. To sport, the sacked Warriors captain Ryan Hoffman admits he was disappointed to lose the role but believes the move may well benefit the NRL club. The 23-year-old fullback Roger Tuivasa-Sheck will take over this season after coach Stephen Kearney decided change was needed to halt their 5-year run of finals misses. Hoffman admits he was surprised when told of his demotion and that he wouldn't be needed in 2018 when Kiwis forward Tohu Harris arrives from Melbourne on a 4-year deal.
Anytime you get told that you're not going to be the captain or the club's going in a different way, or I was keen to stay. I was keen to stay one more year, but the clubs made their decisions that they were up front. As a footy player, you accept them and move on.
Ryan Hoffman. New Zealand's world golf number 1, Lydia Ko, doesn't believe there'll be a conflict of interest after hiring a new coach, Gary Gilchrist. The South African, who coaches world number 2, Arya Jutanagan of Thailand. Ko split with their coach of 3 years, David Ledbetter, in December.
There's, a bunch of us that work with Gary, and I think they all trust him and enjoy working with him. So I don't think it's necessarily a rivalry thing, but it almost gives me confidence that, hey, he's a great coach, and hopefully this will be good going forward.
Lydia Ko, and that's the news.
Gunfire and ice cream.
Come to work to make some ice creams and you have a man with a gun asking for money and then the gun goes off.
Andrew Little lays down the law.
Everybody is totally united and focused on one thing, and that is about changing the government.
And an all-white legend dies.
He was a warrior and certainly was always down in my notes in the diary, Sumner. Question mark, what we're going to do with him.
The Beautiful Game. Guy Aspinall and Susie Ferguson, morning reports, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, should the government change the law so egregious privacy breaches can be punished by $1 million fines? And after 10, Ghosts of Gondwana, why New Zealand plants and animals are so different to other countries. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waitomo, also Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Rain or showers with possible localised downpours, easing to isolated showers from early tomorrow, but becoming fine from Waikato and Bay of Plenty southwards. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain, possibly heavy, easing about Hawke's Bay overnight, and Gisborne later tomorrow. Taihape to Wellington, cloud clearing overnight and becoming fine. Taranaki, Taumarunui and Taupo, also Wairarapa, Marlborough and Canterbury Canterbury. Mostly cloudy with isolated showers today. Fine tomorrow, but the odd shower remaining in Wairarapa. Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland, mostly fine. Isolated showers in Buller, spreading to Westland tomorrow, becoming cloudy in Fiordland tomorrow with patchy rain at night. Otago and Southland fine, apart from isolated showers about eastern Otago until this evening. And the Chatham Islands, fine spells increasing. It's 6:09 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Kia ora, Katrina. People who want their doctor to prescribe medicinal cannabis will no longer need to get ministerial approval, but they still will have to get sign-off from the Health Ministry. The Associate Health Minister, Peter Dunn, says when he first started receiving applications a few years ago, it was a very complicated and contentious issue, and he felt he should bear the responsibility for approving or declining applications, not officials. But he says he's now happy to hand that responsibility over to the Ministry in the hope that it will make it quicker and easier to access non-pharmaceutical cannabis-based products. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
There have been high-profile campaigns for better access, including by the late Helen Kelly and Rose Renton, whose 19-year-old son Alex died after suffering from acute epilepsy. Peter Dunn has delegated authority for approval to the Health Ministry. He says much has changed in the past few years.
This was new territory to cover, and I think what's changed in the interim is there have been more cases. We've now got an expertise and a process sense. We've got clearer guidelines. We had no guidelines at that point, so we've got a much better environment for dealing with these matters.
Mr Dunn says the decision has been driven by those factors rather than the public campaigns.
There are various campaigns along the way. While I respect the integrity of those campaigns and what they were about, they didn't really influence that.
Labour's Annette King welcomes the move but wants an assurance it will actually improve access.
The questions that need to be asked is when a specialist makes an application to the Ministry of Health, what products will they be able to access? How long will it take the Ministry to process the application before they can get access to a product?
The Greens Health spokesperson Julianne Genter says the removal of ministerial approval does not go far enough.
It's just really strange that specialists and doctors aren't able to prescribe medicine that has cannabis in it when they're able to prescribe medicine that has, say, opiates. It's very bizarre that we have this incredibly careful approach to medicines with cannabis in it when they've been shown to be incredibly effective.
Mr Dunn says in coming years it will become easier for people to access cannabis-based products as the number of products that would not require ministry approval is likely to increase. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Back to the US now, where an appeals court has questioned whether President Donald Trump's travel ban discriminates against Muslims. The President's executive order temporarily banned entry for all refugees and visitors from 7 mainly Muslim countries until it was halted last week. One of the 3 judges on the appeals court in San Francisco has asked if it can be discriminatory if it affects only 15% of the world's Muslims. Our correspondent Harry Horton is in Washington. He joins us now with the latest. Good evening, Harry. What are the 2 sides, what have they argued in court today?
Well, this was an hour-long hearing. The judges gave a pretty tough series of questions to both lawyers representing the government and the lawyers representing the states of Minnesota and Washington who brought this case forward. Essentially, there's 2 arguments going on here. One argument is over the morals of this ban, whether or not it's constitutional and whether or not it discriminates against Muslims. And the other argument is whether or not a state, like Washington in this case, has the power to halt an executive order by the president as they have done. So the argument from the government lawyers is that, look, this is in the interests of national security and the President of the United States should have the power to be able to decide who he wants to let come into the country. The arguments for the state lawyers for Minnesota and Washington, they say that this executive order has unleashed chaos in their state. Their lawyer said that families have been separated, long-time residents were unable to travel overseas. So a pretty tough time for both lawyers. Difficult to know which way the judges are going to rule on this case. They've gone away to make the decision. We'll find out at some point soon.
Have the judges said anything at all today?
Well, they've said that they're going to make a decision as soon as possible. I mean, in all honesty, that could be at some point in the next few hours. It could be at some point in the next few days. I think what's quite clear is whichever side loses this case, we expect that they will appeal against the result. That could mean it goes down to a lower court, depending on the ruling, or goes up to a higher court. But many legal experts here in Washington expect that at some point this case will end up in the US Supreme Court. And that's important because you might recall recently Donald Trump nominated a new judge, Judge Neil Gorsuch, to fill the current vacancy on the Supreme Court. Democrats here in Washington say that they're going to make the confirmation hearing for that new Supreme Court judge as difficult as possible now, as they hope to try and drag this issue out and make it as embarrassing as possible for Donald Trump.
And what does that mean for the executive order? I mean, does that effectively put everything on hold, Harry?
Absolutely. So as things stand at the moment, this temporary stay, this vacuum that we're currently in, where the executive order is paused, is in place. So immigrants from those 7 Muslim majority countries who have visas to enter the United States, they can continue their journeys to the US if they want to. And many of them have been doing. The US refugee program is back up and running again. So any refugees who had been granted permission to come to the United States, they're now travelling back over here. But when this ruling comes through from the court, as I said, it could be in the next few hours, it could be in the next few days. If they decide that it isn't lawful for states such as Washington and Minnesota to block a presidential executive order, then Donald Trump's immigration ban will come back into force. And immediately at that point, those visas from those 7 Muslim majority countries will be revoked once more, and the refugee program will be halted again.
Has there been any reaction from Donald Trump yet?
Not yet from Donald Trump. He earlier today, before the court ruling, he indicated that he might be willing to pursue this all the way to the Supreme Court if possible. We've had no reaction from him since the court hearing earlier today. He's in a difficult position at the moment because his Attorney General, who would head the Department of Justice, still isn't in place. Jeff Sessions, his confirmation hearing is going on right now in the US Senate. So he's fighting one of the biggest legal battles we've seen in years in Washington without the head of his Justice Department. So he's in a pretty tricky position at the moment, and the Justice Department isn't as strong as it would probably like to be at taking on such a big case on behalf of the government.
Thanks for that, Harry. Our correspondent in Washington, Harry Horton. And this, of course, comes after the Vice President, Mike Pence, has had to step in to confirm a cabinet nomination. It's the first time this has happened in the history of American politics. The US Senate has confirmed Donald Trump's nominee for Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos. She's a wealthy Republican donor, but only after Mike Pence stepped in to cast a tie-breaking vote. A woman says the man accused of murdering her father on a remote hilltop north of Auckland had been her rock. Michael Waipori has denied charges of kidnapping and murdering Lance Murphy by beating him to death with a baseball bat and a tree branch in November 2015. His co-accused Steve Gunby is charged with kidnapping and being an accessory by helping to get rid of the body. Our Auckland court reporter Edward Gay filed this report.
Today, Mr Murphy's daughter Sherelle Murphy said shortly before her father disappeared, he'd had a falling out with his longtime friend Michael Waipori, whose nickname was Cruz. She told the court she got a call from her sister, Christy Thompson, about it.
Christy had rung me and said that Dad was freaking out because Cruz and him had an argument and he was scared because Cruz had threatened to kill him.
Miss Murphy said despite the threat, they were given assurances from Mr Waipori's partner that nothing would happen. Christy Thompson told Mr Waipori's lawyer John Munro of her close-knit family and their ties with Mr Waipori, who was her godfather.
Michael Waipori was one of the people you would go to for help, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was well respected by your mother and Lance. He was kind of like a confidant for you.
He was my rock.
She said she got a strange phone call from Mr Waipoti 2 days after her father went missing.
He was talking about stolen diamonds. He was very agitated and jumping from one thing to another thing. He was talking about Maori land wars.
According to the Crown case, Mr Waipoti had by this time lured Mr Murphy to a property north of Warkworth, handcuffed him, put a hood over his head and taken him to a hilltop property near Puhoi, where he repeatedly hit him in the head with a baseball bat and a tree branch. His body would not be found for a further 3 weeks. Miss Thompson had no idea what had happened to her father. She said she drove around to Mr Waipoti's house to drop off some of his mail that had been sent to her father's home.
He was calm. He just gave me a hug and I gave him the mail, and sometimes he was a man of few words, and that day he was. So I didn't think too much about it, to be honest.
She said Mr Waipoti made no mention of her father. She told Mr Waipoti's lawyer John Munro that her father's life was going off the rails shortly before he disappeared.
We know he was perhaps using a bit of meth around this time, in your view?
I'd never seen it, but I definitely had big concerns about it.
Your mother was dead against him using meth, wasn't she?
She was dead against anyone using meth.
She said he'd fallen out with other friends recently and there'd been an argument in the family over a will. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ko Edward Gay aho.
Almost 500 workers have been evacuated from Inland Revenue's Hawkstone Street building in central Wellington because of earthquake damage. Engineers found the damage when they did an invasive inspection ordered by the council. An IRD spokesperson, Pete van Schadenberg, told our reporter Michael Kropp the damage is to a couple of the precast concrete floors and the building has been closed as a precautionary measure.
Early this afternoon we received a report from our engineers that was in relation to some work they carried out on the weekend, and that was as part of the Wellington City Council request that 80 buildings around the city had some further engineering investigation.
And what did that engineering report show?
Well, the engineers had some concerns about a couple of the prefabricated concrete floors in that building in Hawkstone Street. And they recommended that we do some relatively minor remedial work.
Okay, those concerns, does that relate at all to how those precast concrete floors attach to the walls of the building?
I'm not actually sure. I haven't actually seen the report, but as I understand, it's not a structural issue with the building itself.
Yet it's enough to evacuate.
That's right. We took a precautionary step because obviously staff are important to us, and having the building evacuated means that remedial work can be undertaken as soon as possible.
What are you able to tell us about that building? How many floors? What sort of era is it?
Sorry, I don't have a lot of detail actually. I know that we've got around between 450 and 500 staff work from that building. The majority of our Wellington staff work in the building in Featherston Street.
That's the Astron Centre, which was closed for a while as well, wasn't it?
That's right. And the same additional checks that were carried out at Hawkstone Street have also been carried out in the Astron building, and they were found to have, no requirements for any further additional work.
Who owns the building?
In Hawkstone Street. Again, sorry, don't have that information.
Okay, and there's a childcare centre in that building. Has that also been evacuated?
I'm not aware, but I would expect so. They're the only other significant tenant in that building.
Have you shared the engineering report with them?
Again, can't confirm that, but I would assume as another tenant they would have that information at their disposal.
The remedial work that needs to be done, when's that likely to begin, and any idea of what it's likely to entail?
Again, can't confirm any details around that. We've only received this report from our engineers early this afternoon, so it's relatively early days in terms of the process of getting the work carried out, but certainly we'll be looking to do it as soon as possible and to minimise any disruption to our staff who work there.
For your staff for the next few days, will they work from home or from other locations?
At this point, again, those decisions need to be made and they'll be looked at first thing in the morning, but I would anticipate that staff initially will be working from home, and then we'll be looking to relocate them to other locations within Wellington.
And that's IRD spokesperson Pete van Schadenberg. Homeowners in a new Plymouth suburb are hoping for a spike in property prices when power pylons, which once serviced a now defunct power station, are finally removed. The power station was decommissioned 8 years ago, but National Grid operator Transpower is still using the pylons, which tower over the seaside suburb of Spotswood. Our Taranaki reporter Robin Martin has more.
Sean Massey Takamura has a tower looming directly over his Rangataki Drive home. He's always worried about its effects on his health and gets irritated by its hum.
Our house is pretty much almost directly underneath the column, and it's a bit of definitely a big eyesore. We have a lot of family cringe quite often when they actually come in out the back and look up and see there's a big power line there. And the fact of the humming of it does have a tendency to put a lot of people off doing it when it's wet.
Mr. Massey Takamura says he'll be pleased when it's finally gone.
It'll be one of the best things ever, not having to step outside and see it every day, and just the fact of the amount of the increase in price for the area around it, etc., for ourselves, for our home and stuff like that, make a big benefit to us as well as the look of the community as well.
Shelley Landon Lane is a real estate agent with Harcourts in New Plymouth. Miss Landon Lane says homeowners in the area could expect an immediate boost to prices when the pylons are removed, especially those living directly in their shadow.
Those houses each there probably are around the 220, 230 mark. They've got incredible sea views, but again blighted by the cables and pylons. However, remove that and, those properties could probably expect a jump of 50 to 60,000.
The National Grid still connects to a substation at the site of the decommissioned power station, but local lines company Powerco wants to spend $7 million to supply electricity to Western New Plymouth via an underground cable instead by 2020, and this has set tongues wagging in Spotswood. Lance Snowden, who also owns a property on Rangataki Drive, says the seaside suburb would flourish if the pylons came out, but he's not convinced it will ever happen.
They've said that so many times, it's just same old, same old. They won't take them out because they have to spend money. Where you have to spend money, you will not get nothing. That's just how it is. I'll be dead in me box by the time they take them out, I reckon.
The Grid General Manager at Transpower is Stephen Jay. Mr Jay says the company is investigating the reconfiguration of its network in New Plymouth, which would most likely involve power entering the city directly at its Carrington Street substation. But he can't promise Spotswood will be free of all 10 of its pylons.
Well, I wouldn't like to be able to confirm that there will be 3 of them yet until we work through our detailed design. But if we are able to underground something or remove a structure that causes an aesthetic impact or relieves an aesthetic impact, of course it's going to be good for our stakeholders or local community.
Transpower has budgeted up to $20 million for decommissioning the towers, and those that do finally come down should be removed in about 2 years' time, a day that can't come soon enough for Spotswood homeowners. In New Plymouth for Checkpoint, ko Robin Martin Tēnei.
And we're just getting reports of a big fire in Rotorua. Eyewitness Ryan Gray is on the line. Hello, Ryan.
Hello.
What can you tell us about the fire?
When I arrived probably 10 minutes ago, there was black and grey smoke billowing out, visible from all of Rotorua. Got a little bit closer to the scene. One police officer was there blocking the road. Many people were there watching, of course. Probably maybe 5 minutes later, the fire appliances arrived and proceeded to put up a fire as the police asked people to evacuate the immediate area.
Where is this fire? It's in a church?
Yes, St John's Church, which is on the corner of Ranulph and Victoria Street.
And how big is this church? I mean, how big is the fire?
The fire was quite large. I guess the church would take a couple hundred people inside, so it's pretty significant.
And people have been evacuated on that road?
They were pushed back. They were immediately across the road and just been moved back maybe 50 to 100 metres back from the scene of the fire.
Is it a residential road or are there businesses there?
There's the Rotorua Central Mall across the road and there are houses that are immediately behind the church.
And are any of these houses, any nearby properties in danger at all?
I couldn't confirm if they were or not, but they were fairly close to the fire, so there's every chance it could jump, I suppose.
So what is happening? So have they got the fire under control yet?
I'm now a couple hundred metres away, but I can see the smoke has definitely died off from when I first arrived.
Right, thank you for that. That is eyewitness Ryan Gray. He's in Rotorua, where there's a major fire at a church in the city, and hopefully we'll have more on this in the news and on our website. Go to radionz.co.nz. A bit of feedback. A few texts have come in on the medicinal cannabis changes. One says Sativex is overpriced. Cannabis in its natural form is the way to go. Common all-garden marijuana. Dried and cure, it is God's sweetest flower. That's from Mike. Another texter says, how does Peter Dunn know there is little demand? Most people who could be helped by medicinal cannabis do not have the resources to pay for Sativex. We keep hearing that there is little evidence as to marijuana's efficacy, but as long as it remains illegal, even anecdotal evidence cannot be collected, let alone evidence from proper medical trials. Now that's Checkpoint for this evening. Thanks for joining us on your radio, your television, online, or however you chose to connect with us today. You can hear highlights in the late edition at 10:15 this evening, or any of our stories tonight on rnz.co.nz/checkpoint. And for all the latest information, news, feature stories from New Zealand and around the world, go to the rnz.co.nz homepage. So from me, Sharon Brett Kelly and the Checkpoint team, have a great night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Almost 500 workers have been evacuated from the Inland Revenue Department's Hawkstone Street building in Wellington after a more detailed inspection found earthquake damage. A rule change that should mean faster and easier access to medicinal cannabis has had a lukewarm reception from drug campaigners. Housing New Zealand has corrected figures it gave to MPs about how many new social houses it's building in Auckland, 1,400 and not 722. And Solid Energy has had to ask for more time to permanently seal the Pike River mine. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This week on Inside Out with me, Nick Tipping, everyone from Mike Stern and Charmaine Ford to some new blood like Kamasi Washington and Ambrose Akinmusere.